All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here will be doing our 2025 preview and predictions for the Wisconsin Badgers. Looking at this coaching staff, Luke Fickell's back for his third year. 12-13 mark thus far. Jeff Grimes, first year in a role of offensive coordinator. Then Mike Tressel, third year in the role as defensive coordinator, but he'll be rocking it solo this year, where he was in a co-coordinator role the past couple seasons. Good offseason here, top 30 high school class, 14th in the portal. In a 5-7 mark. This is the first time since 2001, Nick, that they missed a bowl game. That was a great tradition. I know we had our eye on, and they came up just short of that. So I know Luke Fickell's itching to get back to the postseason. Starting with the offensive side of the ball, this is a big reason why they only were limited to 5 victories last year. So they just didn't have much of an identity. Now you're going to bring in a new offensive coordinator, Jeff Grimes, a guy who's known for a wide zone run scheme, more of a Shanahan-style run attack. The Shanahans at the NFL, of course, have the most complex rushing attack that is hard to defend. And that's what you're going to be looking at here a little bit with Wisconsin. First, though, we're going to start with the quarterback room. This is also an area that's just not been that great the last couple of seasons. They go to the portal heavily here. Billy Edwards comes over from Maryland. I liked his ability to throw the ball. Had some nice touch throws, some good accuracy downfield, showed some good precision across the middle. Shows a nice shoulder pump fake. I thought that was a really impressive part of his game. Really good runner. Very live near the goal line or on those short distances. Had 9 interceptions and benefited a good bit from great play by his pass catchers. Danny O'Neal from San Diego State played pretty well as one can in that offense as a true freshman as well. It's not exactly QB friendly at all when you're playing for the Aztecs. Had some really nice deep ball completions last year. It's a two-way battle here, Nick. I think Edwards, with his experience in the Big Ten last year, is going to get the easy nod as the starter. Those are 2 guys they added in the portal. Also picked up Hunter Simmons as well. So got 3 transfers here. Edwards should get the nod. O'Neal's waiting in the wings. I'm still just not that impressed. I wasn't impressed last year with what they did in the portal, and this doesn't really put me, pushing the needle at all either.
I agree with you. This doesn't move the needle for me at all. This offense has to be better this year if this team wants to get back to the postseason. Something they missed last year, which was certainly a problem for Luke Fickell and company. Like you said, they had a very long bowl streak, 23 years since 2001. They had a lot of pride in that up there in Madison. And to see that gone after losing 5 straight games end the season was certainly disappointing if you're a Wisconsin fan. You could have found another win there to get the job done, and they're not able to do so, and they end up missing a bowl game, and that's certainly disappointing. The offense was really poor last year. This is an offense that just struggled. 22.6 points per game is a really bad number there, 108th in the nation in that number. Below 200 yards passing per game. The rushing attack was not bad, but still was not really up to snuff for Wisconsin. And I was able to catch a game up there last year, and I saw them play Alabama, and they struggled on offense in that game. I think some of the biggest concerns was early on in the season. Only scored 28 points in a win against Western Michigan. Only scored 27 points in a win against South Dakota from the FCS level. That's concerning in those games. They did have 2 Big Ten games where they ended up putting up 40 points on the board against Rutgers and Purdue. But outside of that, they struggled to score a lot of points. Only scored 7 against Minnesota in a key game at the end of the season, 10 against Iowa and Alabama, like I aforementioned there. So this is an offense that was just poor across the board. Now they look to 2 guys from the portal at quarterback here who I don't think either of these guys really push this team to the next level. I think Billy Edwards does get the starting job since, like you said there, he is a veteran that has experience starting in the Big Ten, so I think you want to rely on that. He did show some flashes of Maryland of promise. 2,800 yards passing, 15 touchdowns is nice. The 5 rushing touchdowns is not bad either, but the 9 picks was certainly concerning. He had 2 bad picks against Minnesota, 2 bad picks against Oregon as well, in what were a tough loss for them against Oregon. Some of the completion percentage was completely a mess at times, 50% against Oregon, 58% against Rutgers, where he was just absolutely airing the ball out in a lot of those games here. I think this guy could potentially be solid here, but I don't think you really rely on him in the future. Danny O'Neal is a younger player who showed some success at San Diego State, but still not moving the needle a whole lot for me. 2,100 yards and 12 touchdowns is not bad at all, but this is still going to be an offense I think will be hampered a little bit here. I don't know if I trust either of the quarterbacks they brought out of the portal to really move this team in the right direction.
I definitely think Edwards is an upgrade over Braden Locke. But by how much, I guess we'll see. I definitely like his dual threat capabilities. You look at the rushing attack. This is a team that's always been known for great running backs, and they had a good one last year. Tyree Walker, he transferred out after a good year, so one and done there is really unfortunate. Cade Yasameli was pretty good early on in the season, didn't play in the back half of the year, as Darian Dupree, who's a true sophomore, got on the field instead and was solid, but had some poor games in terms of efficiency. He's 5'10", 205 pounds. Dylan Jones was 139th ranked recruit in last year's class. So I think this is a pretty good room. They love what they have, I think, in Dupree. Some good upside overall. A lot of young guys here, Nick. They're going to be given the keys to pretty inexperienced running backs. But again, they didn't go to the portal for this position. So I think they really like what they have. I trust Luke Fickell and Jeff Grimes' judgment. So I think this is an above average room.
Yeah, I think it's above average room. I do like what they have here. If you're going to find some success on offense, I think it's going to come from running the ball. Dupree is not a bad back, 317 and 1 score for him on 79 touches. I think he'll be a really good number one back. He can take that big step forward. Yesameli as well was not bad in his appearances, 247 and 2 scores for him, while Dylan Jones is a younger player who should be okay. He only had limited touches, but still showed some solid attempts at 5.5 yards per attempt. This will be a solid rushing attack. I think they'll find a way to be good. They were not bad at times last year, 153 yards per game on the ground. This unit could certainly be better than that this year. Then they can find a way to produce a little bit here. Yes, it sucks losing your top back, but overall, I think this is a solid room. They like what they have. They're going to keep rocking with it, and I kind of trust the coaching staff on that decision.
Now you look at the wide receiver group. They're headlined by Vinny Anthony. This guy was a nice breakout star last year. Showcased good explosiveness. I love the speed as he can win on go routes or just slice the defense on quick slants with acceleration. Proved to be a special teams asset as well. They have another young player here in Tretch Kakahuna. Had only 2 good games last year with either none or limited production in most contests, but as a freshman did showcase some good promise out of the slot. Jaden Ballard comes over from Ohio State. Did nothing in his 4 years, though, for the Buckeyes. Joseph Griffin missed last season due to eligibility issues, but he was a solid contributor for Boston College in 2 years at 6'4", 210. I think he can be a really solid outside pass catcher. I have him penciled in as a starter. Chris Brooks only caught 1 pass last year. They have a redshirt freshman in Kion Barry Johnson, who was a 3-star from the state of Illinois. Tucker Ashcraft at tight end, 6'6", 255. Caught a few balls last year. Was a good pass blocker. They had originally landed Tanner Kazoil in the portal from Ball State. He ended up leaving just after a few weeks, though. I thought that was a perfect fit for Wisconsin, so that's unfortunate. They also picked up Lance Mason from Missouri State. I think he's a pretty good addition as well into the tight end room. Solid wide receiver group. I think Anthony Kakahuna will be standouts and Griffin will be good. Depth is not ideal and unproven, but this is not the worst receiving group out of all the teams we've previewed, Nick.
Oh, it's not a bad unit at all. I think it's a solid unit for the conference here. I think Vinny Anthony's a really good player who showed a lot of progress last year. 672, 17.2 yards per grab, and 4 scores for him. He's got some deep threat capabilities, certainly, in this offense. Kekahuna was solid for this team as well, and his rotational reps, 340 for him, and 2 scores, not bad at all. Tucker Ashcraft will get a lot more targets here. He had 82 yards on 12 grabs and a touchdown mixed in there. I think he'll be involved in this offense a lot more often this year. Joseph Griffin, showed some promise at his previous stop at Boston College. I think he'll be solid here when he gets on the field. I think they also, Jaden Ballard maybe could potentially get something out of him. He was produced at Ohio State for a reason, so he must have some serious talent hidden in there somewhere. Chris Brooks is not a terrible player either. I think this is a good unit for the Big Ten. It's not, a crazy unit nationally, but I don't think it's a weak unit at all. There is some high upside here. I think this is not a bad unit in the conference.
Now we move to the offensive line for the Badgers. They lose a really good left tackle in Jack Nelson. They replace him with a very weak transfer in David Heisen, who at Central Michigan played over 1,800 snaps at left tackle and was very poor, allowed 12 career sacks. And he was awful over the back half of the season at MAC play just recently in 2024, Nick, in pass protection. So I don't really understand this addition here. He's going to battle a Leighton Nelson, who has limited snaps to his name back in 2023. And the reason for this, though, is because projected starter Kevin Haywood went down with a torn ACL in the spring. So this is not fully on the coaching staff that they're going to be throwing this guy into the fire, really, because their top guy ended up going down, and they got him in the spring portal. So they kind of had to use some desperation to lock up that position. Joe Bruner, though, he's going to be back at left guard. He was very stout in pass protection, not as consistent in run blocking, though. Center is going to be occupied by a good veteran, Jake Renfro. Started his career at Cincinnati with Fickle. I think he's going to contend for first-team All-American honors in the Big Ten. Kerry Kodanko, a super senior, only has about 30 snaps to his name. Is the leading candidate to slide in at right guard and fill a big void. He's listed about 6'2", 310. They'll also get back another veteran starter in Riley Mallman at right tackle. 4-year starter at this point, 6'8", 308. Good in run blocking and pass protection. One of the more reliable starters you'll find in college football. Depth isn't all that ideal, though. J.P. Bezschwal played 60 snaps last year. That was basically it in terms of reps by the number 2s on the current chart. I think Wisconsin will be just fine up front, Nick. This is always a group that's great for the Badgers, but of course the run game has went downhill over time, and it's possible the offensive line play could as well. Left tackle is just a tough situation for him, Nick. The starter goes down. They have to go get a guy who wasn't that great at a much lower level. People consider the MAC to be the worst in the FBS. Now this guy has to go compete in the Big Ten. Good luck.
Yeah, certainly a tough late cycle for them. They add Heinzman, who's from the state of Wisconsin. They bring him back from Central Michigan. He just wasn't very good for them last year. Heisen, that is. He just wasn't very good for them last year. Leighton Nelson, he's not very good either. I don't think at left tackle. They lost the guy they had there. That's certainly a big, tough break if you're a Wisconsin fan. Obviously not super happy about that. Joe Bruner, I like him at left guard. I think Jake Renfro is not bad at center either. Kadonko at right guard is a player that's been around the program for a while, not played a lot, but maybe he's got something there. And then Riley Mahlman is a really solid asset at right tackle. Will probably be the best player on this offensive line when it's all said and done. Not a terrible unit. Again, another middle of the pack unit on the O-line here. I think there's upside there, but it's still just kind of a weak unit across the board. Curious to see how it pans out and what the effect it has on the running game.
Bruner, Renfro, and Mahlman, if we did a list of top individuals at their position in the conference, I think all three of those would be top 5, Nick. So that's a great building block, at least to figure things out at right guard and left tackle. So I think the Badgers are going to be pretty happy with what they have. They're going to be just fine. Those 3 guys are real standouts.
Yeah, I like Bruner a lot there. I think he's really good. I think Mahlman's a phenomenal player who will probably be the best player on this offensive line when it's all said and done. And Renfro's a good leader at center. Those are 3 key pieces here. As long as you can nail your right guard and left tackle, this will be a really strong unit.
Now you look at the offensive verdict. The Badgers certainly have upgraded at quarterback of Edwards and O'Neal, but I'm not exactly sure if either will be able to uplift the passing attack to be a daunting group. I do like the supporting cast with some of the younger pass catchers and running backs, and again, I think that offensive line can be really good as long as left tackle doesn't turn into, a catastrophic failure. Quality group here, I think 25, 28 points per game is a lock. That's kind of what I'm looking at. That would be a massive improvement from last year. I'm going to give them a B- as well, Nick. So a lot of conflicting feelings from me, but I think this can be a good group at the end of the day.
This could certainly be a good group at the end of the day. They bring in Grimes, who was previously at Baylor and Kansas most recently. He's hoping to kind of turn this offense around that just wasn't really that good last year at all. I read off the stats there. They struggled in some of those games where they had to get a little bit more out of their program. I think this is an offense that has some nice pieces. I still think they're missing the full puzzle here. I don't think it's going to be that strong of an offense in this conference. They're going to rely on the defense to win them some games if they want to get back to bowl eligibility.
And I move to the defensive side of the ball. Pretty good unit last year for the Badgers. Definitely overlooked with only the 5 wins. They returned 6 starters and added 12 guys in the portal. Starting up front, 5 of those adds from the portal ended up coming from this part of the defense. They needed some reinforcements badly and getting things started at defensive end. Corey Walker arrives from Western Michigan. He was a really good run defender and a combined 1,000 snaps for him over the last 2 seasons. 6'5", 270. Charles Perkins from UT Martin was also a good run defender. 6'3", 285. He can play inside or out. I think he's added on more weight, so he should probably be closer to 300 pounds. Michael Gardner, they're hoping can be more of a pass rush specialist for them. Did well for Grambling in his brief appearances, so I think that's a promising prospect. The interior gets back Ben Barton, who was pretty lackluster in his near 500 snaps. 6'5", 308, had no tackles for loss. There really wasn't even a gap clogger either. Dylan Johnson wasn't that good himself and far less reps in his freshman season. They did pick up a 300-pounder from Tulane and Parker Peterson, who was a solid rotational player, run support, nothing crazy though. And Javier Suggs only ended up seeing slightly over 100 snaps at LSU. Despite that being a weak spot for him, he couldn't crack the rotation that much. Phenomenal addition here late though. Mason Riger from Louisville missed last year, but I was happy with his aggression and run defense help back in 2023. I remember the tape on him really impressed for the Cardinals. I like the variety of some of the guys they got in the portal overall. I think they really need all these guys to step up as a group, though, Nick. What do you make of this defensive line? For most, it's going to be a lot of, it's a combination of no names, and then the guys who return weren't all that impressive. So where's that leave us?
It's certainly a weaker unit, right? This is a unit that's not very strong on the front foot here, but I think there are some solid pieces that could help push this team. I think they did go to the portal and get some solid names there. I'll start with the 2 guys they return in Peterson and Johnson. Peterson, he needs to find, Ben Barton, that is. Ben Barton needs to find a way to be better for this team. 22 total tackles, 5 pass breakups, though he did get his hand up on the line. Dylan Johnson had 7 total tackles, and their limited reps here. I think when you look at the portal adds, Corey Walker's the one that really stands out. He could be a big key difference maker for this team. He was solid last year at Western Michigan. 38 total tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks, 3 QB hurries, 5 pass breakups. He really got better down the stretch. He had 2 sacks against Central Michigan, 3 tackles for loss, and 7 sacks in that game. So he's a guy that got better throughout the season. I think Walker is going to be your key name here. Charles Perkins was not bad at UT Martin. I think he's got some solid size as well. That could be good. Parker Peterson had some solid rotational reps, 21 total tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, 2 QB hurries for him. I think he'll be really good. I like the size on him at 6'4", 315. And then Suggs as well didn't do a whole lot for LSU, but did have 3 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, 2 QB hurries, and 2 pass breakups and rotational reps. Did have some a sack against Texas A&M and a tackle for loss in that game. So he's not a terrible player either. I think they can try and get a little bit more out of him. I think this D-line can certainly develop as the season goes on. It's a bit of a weaker unit on paper, but I do like what they added out of the portal.
I look at the linebacking group. We'll start with the inside linebackers, Tackett Curtis. He'll step into a starting role, saw about 200 snaps last year, and then 2 years ago for USC, he was on the field plenty as a true freshman. He's been very soft. Has really struggled to be an efficient tackler. Really has just been bad in all regards, but the good news is he's no longer working with Alex Grinch, who was on staff last year. So now he might be able to learn how to play football, Nick. So Christian Alligero, he's going to step into a starting lineup with ease. He was poor in coverage, but in a backup role was phenomenal versus a run. He was also second on the team in tackles, so he showcased great efficiency. And Tarion Turner, a guy who was a starter for Western Carolina, he was a bit of an average player. Tyler Janzi, he's a third-year guy. He's going to be alongside him. And then you also have Aaron Witt, who played 300 snaps. Well, wasn't all that good off the edge, but a veteran. Of course, you're going to return Daryl Peterson off the edge. And Mason Reiger might fill one of those outside linebacking roles as well. Peterson wasn't as great as I anticipated this past year, but 2 years ago he was a perennial playmaker for them with 10 tackles for loss and almost 5 sacks. So I think this is a respectable linebacking group, Nick. And again, they have some nice coaches. I think that can help beef this group up compared to last year.
It's a unit that's not too terrible. Witt is a solid player, 25 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss. Daryl Peterson, 28 total tackles and a sack for him last year. I think he can certainly find a way to be involved. Some of the ads, I think Turner is not a terrible ad out of the portal. Tyler Jancy could certainly find a way to be involved in this unit as well. Not a terrible unit at all.
Think about Daryl Peterson. He went from 10 tackles for loss in 23 to only 1 this past year, Nick. Maybe some Wisconsin fans can clear it up for us because I'm not sure what happened, and that came week 2 against an FCS opponent. So he was non-existent all year long.
Yeah, he certainly struggled, and they have to find a way to try to uncork him and get him in the backfield to add some production for this team.
Now you look at the secondary, which is going to be a clear strength for the Badgers. They have 2 really solid corners to return in Ricardo Hallman, Nazir for Aquarian. Hallman had 7 picks and 5 pass breakups back in 2023, but he had no picks and only 4 pass breakups this past year. Major production dip, and he did struggle bad versus the run. For Quirian, on the other hand, was improved as a player across the board. So strong potential here, especially if Hallman can get back to that elite level when it comes to plucking the ball out of the air. He had 2 transfers to be the backups. Gamir Lattimore was a very stout player for Jacksonville State for 2 years. Donnie Hill arrives from Miami. He was below average, but was good at Marshall the year earlier. Austin Brown was great in the slot and coverage and was greatly efficient tackler. The guy who saw the second most snaps of the slot was starting safety Preston Zachman, who was elite in all areas at strong safety. This guy is a clear leader there. Matthew Trenor arrives from Richmond to compete with redshirt junior Charlie Jarvis. He was tremendous in his lone year with the Spiders. Also added Matthew Jung from Bethel, who's 6'3", 225. I think the secondary, quite frankly, is going to be one of the best in the country, Nick. It was a season ago. I think they're going to do it again. It'll be even better. Luke Fickell's an architect when it comes to the constructing secondaries. What he had the year at Cincinnati when they went to the playoffs was incredible, Nick. Not even Bryce Young could get many completions off against them. 3 guys from that secondary are starters in the NFL currently all these years later. So this is a clear, strong point. Good luck throwing on these guys, Nick. This is a clear advantage for them on a weekly basis.
Yeah, the secondary is phenomenal. You make a good point there. I was at that playoff game between Cincinnati and Alabama, and Alabama won that game by running the damn ball. They were not able to really do anything. Sauce Gardner locked down the Alabama wide receivers. Before I get to secondary, I will say I did omit Christian Alligero, who they return is a really good linebacker. 6'6" total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks for him. He was really good for this team last year. A good leader. Now looking at the secondary, I think Zachman's a great safety. They returned 58 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2 picks, 4 pass breakups. He's really good. Forquan was solid for this team as well. 51 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, an interception, and 5 pass breakups. He'll be really good again this year. Austin Brown was a solid asset. 51 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 1 sack, and 3 pass breakups. Well, Ricardo Hallman has to be better this year. 16 total tackles, 4 pass breakups. He's not very good against the run, but his coverage was not bad at times last year. If he can play back to the level he's played at previous years, I think he'll be really solid for this team. Austin Brown's not bad at nickelback either. They get some more versatility out of him. Matthew Trenor was not a terrible ad from Richmond. I think that guy could certainly find a way to be involved and get meaningful reps for this team at free safety. This is a good secondary. They were good last year. I expect them to be good again this year. I like what they were able to do against the pass. Obviously a top 15 unit, so they were pretty damn solid. I like what the coaching can do as well here. This will be a very big, major strength for this defense.
I look at the defensive verdict for the Badgers. Last year they were a great unit, and I think they should be top 25 in the country with ease. The secondary is lights out. I think they have a quality linebacking room. Pass rush needs to get better, and the run stuffing aspect from its D-line will also need to showcase improvements to take its next step. I think they're going to improve across the board, though, Nick. They're fully giving the keys to Mike Tressel. Fickell's going to have a lot of influence, of course, on this defense. So I'm going to go ahead and give them an A-. I know that's a lofty number for some of the weaknesses they have up front. 17 sacks last year was abysmal. especially with 4 of those coming against some weak non-conference opponents. So the numbers were pretty weak for them, but I trust the coaching and I trust what Wisconsin's going to be able to accomplish. And we have an elite secondary in the back end. There's endless possibilities. So I'm going to go ahead and give them an A-. Is that too high?
No, I think it's appropriate grade. Maybe a B plus is probably more appropriate. That's kind of where I land. I think A minus B plus is kind of where you're supposed to be. I'm gonna go B plus. The secondary is phenomenal. I really like what they have here. They added some solid pieces. They have a great unit. Defensive line, they added some nice pieces. I think Corey Walker will be a really big, high impact transfer from Western Michigan. He's a solid player. The linebacking core is solid as well. The D line's definitely a little bit weak, but I think they can find a way to overcome that. They have to get sacks and tackles for loss. They want to be competitive in this conference. That's gonna be the big key difference maker. Can this defensive line produce? Can they stuff the run and get good stops in the backfield? That's something I'm keeping an eye on.
Now I move to the schedule and the prediction for Wisconsin. The Badgers' results have been far worse than we would have hoped for through 2 years. And I think Fickell might be realizing this is a harder task than we signed up for. But the Badgers' defense has the capabilities to be elite. Is there going to be enough offense to capitalize? We'll see if Edwards can really be dynamic and their run game can get back to chewing up opponents on the ground. And again, Nick, Fickell turned down some high-profile jobs. USC was available at the time, LSU, Notre Dame if he wanted it. He had 3 phenomenal jobs. He ended up taking the Wisconsin one instead. I think he was potentially hoping out that Ohio State would open up, and it never did. Does he want to be here? I think he certainly does, but this has definitely been a harder task than what we would have expected through 2 years, and I think he'll be good in year 3, getting to a bowl game. But when are we going to really start to see that progression? They host Ohio State. This is a game that's going to mean a lot to them, of course. I think that's a winnable contest for them. A lot of tough games across the board. I don't have them really winning any road games this year because they're all against much better opponents than them. At some point, Wisconsin's going to hope they can get back to winning 10 games a year. And that's why they got rid of Paul Chryst, Nick, because that's all they were getting, 10 wins a year. Well, sometimes maybe you probably shouldn't go against the grain and aim for higher, lofty expectations. I think Fickell can get you there, but man, it's really tough right now. It's going to be, in terms of morale, hard to get back to where they were a couple seasons ago.
Dare I say the seat is getting warm for Luke Fickell in Madison. Missing a bowl game last year was unacceptable. This is a program that's been doing it for our entire lives, for Dalton and I's entire lives at least. And they missed a bowl game last year, which is a huge problem and a big no-no up there in Madison. That was a problem, and I think it's something they're keeping an eye on because that could certainly be a problem again this year. This team needs to find a way to win football games and get the job done. They got to get back to a bowl game. I'm just not seeing it. The schedule is tough. The road splits are not very easy at all. At Oregon, at Michigan, at Alabama are games you're going to lose. Same deal at Indiana. That team should be very good this year. Maybe a pick off Minnesota end of the season, but they laid an egg in that contest last year when bowl eligibility was on the line. Certainly something you want to keep an eye on. I think they can find a way to maybe pick off one of these tougher teams in the Big Ten at home because that is a very tough home environment. I was extremely impressed when I went up there for a game. Madison's a very fun town, and Camp Randall certainly rocks when they're playing tough teams, even when they're not playing very good football. This schedule, the non-conference outside of Alabama, I think you get 2 free wins against Miami, Ohio, and Middle Tennessee, although Miami, Ohio could be a sneaky one. That's not a bad team at all. Keep an eye on that one. Fickell's got to do something here, though. This offense got to look better here. The offense was absolutely atrocious last year. I'm not sure I trust it to be better this year. The defense should still be really strong, but I don't know if they can bail you out of all the games that they're going to need bailing out of. I wonder what the new play calling is going to look like this year. I think the hire was not bad at bringing in Jeff Grimes, but I'm curious to see how he kind of moves this offense and what direction he looks forward to. Luke Fickell's got to start getting stuff done, or his name's going to be mentioned in terms of coaches certainly on the hot seat. I think that seat is getting warmer for him up in Madison. Got to find a way to get back to a bowl game here. If they miss a bowl game 2 years in a row, the fans are going to get very uneasy and very unhappy up in Wisconsin.
Yeah, I mean, my prediction includes them beating Washington and Illinois, who I think are 9-win teams who are going to be very good. I wasn't going to disrespect Wisconsin and pick them to win 4 games. I think that's nonsense. But those are losable games, Nick, so they could easily find themselves with a very horrendous record. I picked them to beat Iowa. It's another game that's certainly losable if you don't, match their physicality. Very difficult schedule across the board. I think if they can maybe pick off Ohio State, go on the road and beat Michigan, I think they can certainly turn the tide, who they're going to end up losing to on September 13th. But this is kind of a wait and see with Wisconsin, because I think the team's a lot better and the record's going to indicate. But man, something's got to give eventually, and Fickell needs to start producing. And this maybe could be the year if they really figure out the offense. I think this is one of the more interesting teams for us to watch this upcoming season, Nick, and I'm looking forward to it.
Extremely interesting team to watch. I'm glad I get to watch them play my team, so I'll be able to really watch them up close and personal on September 13th and kind of get a better eye on how this team looks. I'm certainly going to tune in October 18th as well to that game, a very key game against Ohio State. Curious to see how this team goes. They're a very intriguing team in the Big Ten. They can certainly find a way to win a lot more games than we're giving them credit for. But right now, I'm taking a cautious approach. Certainly a wait and see with Wisconsin. Curious to see how it unfolds.
Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.